Hi, I'm Jess.
And I'm Bryn.
Welcome to another week.
The lines between business and life aren't always clear, especially when you're building something from the ground up.
At the Double Digest, we're talking about what it really takes to run a brand, navigate challenges, and show up fully, both in work and in life.
Let's dive in. Welcome back to another week.
We're excited to dive in. So Bryn, how was your week? What were you focused on from a business perspective?
Yeah, this week we saw a lot of economic uncertainty, obviously, and that's starting to trickle down now, I think, into consumer sentiment. So it was interesting. I read something about how it's important that your customers don't go into a break-fix model where they only buy your product when the current product they have is broken. And instead you want to get them into more of a buying because they want the product. And I think that's really important, especially in times of economic uncertainty, because let's say our first product, a bra, if we're looking at that. Yes, we're looking at, okay, well, they purchase our bra over a different bra, but that's only if they need a bra. However, we should also be thinking about, if they're spending $145 on a bra, they could have also spent $145 on a sweater or on going out for dinner or on an experience. So how do we convince them that that our product is worth spending that money on? And so looking at kind of those pieces about, and that's, that'll go down to marketing. So is it that we want to talk to her about the importance of comfort and how that really impacts her day to day and how critical that is? Or do we want to talk to her about how freeing it is not to have a size? Or do we want to talk to her about how cool and innovative this is and like how exciting it is to try something new and to get something from a scan? So I think there's a lot of talk we've been having internally about what does that pull messaging look so that it doesn't have to be a push messaging.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And where is the marketing team kind of going with that in mind?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to do that is to create kind of hype in the influencer community. I think there's been a lot of talk about, is influencer marketing still relevant in this day and age as consumer trust goes down? But we are looking at working with some influencers, doing gifting programs, and we're looking specifically at women who we know would actually want our product, and that's what we ask them when we reach out to them. So we're looking at women, between 45 and 65, which is our target market, but also looking for women, and this might sound a bit creepy, but who have like a bigger than average chest. So we're looking at their content and making sure that there's somebody who wears a bra, needs a supportive bra, maybe has struggled to find a bra in the past, so that they can actually speak authentically about the product. And we're not paying for the post, it's gifting. So, we want to make sure that they are actually excited about the product and want to speak to it. But I think, sometimes that can be a slower model, but we are bootstrapping ourselves right now, so we can't turn, on a marketing engine as much as we could if we had a marketing budget.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I've been hearing so much around the conversation around brands creating a community versus paying influencers and what the difference is. And I heard an interesting conversation around Poppy, how they had sent influencers like the huge vending machines, and I think they got a lot of flack for that because people were like, that's so much money to give to one person, and you could have set up vending machines at communal spaces where everyone could have enjoyed them. And I've heard kind of two different versions where it's like Poppy's also done a really great job at building community. So where is the line? Like if they created that budget specifically for influencers and you get to do this really fun, showy marketing that creates headlines, why not? But definitely keeping that balance. There feels like there's some, equity. And then I don't know, it'd be so interesting to know internally, how did that do? Because sometimes even bad PR can be good PR, and it was definitely a big moment for marketing messaging.
And we have that, community building as part of it. We have our Facebook group where we have a closed off community where people can have conversations about things that are relevant in that in that space. And then we also have our bra parties where each customer can host their friends over, and we send them the swatch book, and they can have that kind of exciting showcase experience with their friends. At a certain point though, an influencer is more scalable because they have that bigger reach, and that's why I think influencers are still relevant, just because one person having a party, they reach 10 people versus a micro influencer who has 5,000 followers. Each post is maybe reaching 1,000 people, so it's you can grow 10 times faster that way.
And I think you could still build community through those micro influencers, like you said, making sure you're finding people who actually benefit from your product and they're not just doing it like for the money, and it's like not really authentic to them, and it might not then translate well to their community. And I think some influencers have much better conversion because they only talk about products that they love, and like their following is like so core to who they are, and like those...
they've built trust.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When I worked at Ben & Jerry's, we never paid influencers. That was like
Cool.
part of the core tenet of how they did their marketing, is it always had to be like either through a gifted experience or gifted product, but it always had to be authentic, which I feel like I learned a lot through that.
Yeah, I love that. Because I feel like the influencers I follow, whenever it's really obvious that it's like paid ad and like you can tell it's a bit more like they're going through the motions, you just feel a little bit less connected to that product, and you feel a bit like, okay, this feels like a job versus like something that they're using every day and loving.
I remember having a hard time with that too. Yeah, I remember at Unilever, that was an issue because the FTC guidelines say that you have to have like hashtag ad, like disclose that it's an ad in the first line of text. And so
Wow.
it's always going to feel like a paid ad if you're following those guidelines, and that's in place to protect consumers so that they know that the person's being compensated. But then what's that balance of?
Yeah, like how do you know
influence?
they're being true to themselves and like they're doing it because they love the brand and it's nice to be paid versus I'm only doing it for a paycheck?
Yeah, I think it's become a very difficult area to see where the ROI is because, yeah, to your point, you do need to pay people for the work they've put in. And, you know, a lot of influencers, similar to building a business, like you don't make a lot of money at the beginning because you're building, and then you are then looking to get paid out for the community that you've built. But then at the same time, it doesn't feel as authentic if there's money exchanging hands.
Yeah, it's definitely such an interesting industry, and so much has like pivoted. We were talking a lot about AI this week, and I feel like it's so interesting to see like the major shifts that have happened. And like when you and I were in high school, influencers didn't exist because social media didn't exist, and it's like this entire industry now, and it's very interesting. So how much marketing has become democratized, which is so amazing. But then you also see like, all of these new challenge areas. But it's it's really fascinating. So speaking about marketing, I know we did a little bit of scenario planning this week. So we're going into, I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, doing a pre-seed raise for the first time. So Bryn and I currently own 100% of the company. So this will be the first time that we're giving up any equity. And obviously we have a goal in mind, but with the economic landscape being uncertain and, you just never know when you'll find your perfect match for an investor, we're doing some scenario planning and seeing how that affects the different types of like hiring and marketing initiatives that we can do.
Yeah, I think it's, what can you do with less money and where do you then start to prioritize? And for fundraising, part of it's going to be what allows you to get to the next raise and how do you drive that excitement. And at the beginning, for a company like ours, it's very much going to be revenue. And so, we're looking at spending our raise across software development to build our marketing and manufacturing. But at the lowest level, if we can't get money, then we need to focus on marketing and manufacturing so that we can get enough revenue to hit the next goal. And I think, that's just the trade-offs that you have to talk about, and it's everything layers on to each other. So, okay, with this marketing spend, how many customers do we think that will bring in? And then do we have enough capacity to meet the demand for those customers? So that's what we were kind of balancing. And then this morning I was talking to somebody and they asked what we do with more money. So then you also have to kind of go up. And if you had twice as much money, what would you be able to do with that? How quickly would you be able to scale?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you go through the process too, I almost feel like there's more comfort sometimes in the lower dollar because scaling so quickly. We've talked about this so many times, like everything breaks because you've been operating in a certain way, and then once you scale, it totally breaks your supply chain and your manufacturing and your marketing. Like all of a sudden you're doing things completely differently. So that can be really daunting as well, and like how many changes you need to do so quickly.
Yeah, and that's part of also building it out, right? So if you need to have a different process, like how much money will it cost to put that new process in place? And I think it's tough because you have to kind of decide early if you want to be a venture scalable company where you're looking to 5 to 10x your company's growth quickly, or if you want to be more of like an angel or lifestyle company where you're growing slowly year over year.
Yeah.
And I think we have a very ambitious goal to kind of be the main innovation that's happening in the retail and garment landscape, totally transform how people buy and wear their clothing. And that's very much more of a venture backable business, like we're starting with bras but we're scaling into all garments, which is a huge market, versus if we just wanted to make bras better, then that's maybe a smaller business that we don't need venture capital for. But we do have a clear path to what does 10x, how can we 10x our business. But if we can't get enough money in this first round, then you kind of have to make it like a friends and family round, because we won't have enough money to 10x or 2x our revenue. And so then you start to get into like a negative loop. So there's a bit of pressure there.
Yeah, I think you said, like, you touched on something interesting there that I don't know if people necessarily think about in the beginning, and it's like, why are you in business? Like, are you doing this so this is your job forever? Do you want it to be able to, like, you know, pay your bills and have a little bit of extra, but you want to really just like create a job for yourself? Or do you want to create, you know, like massive change, and do you want to be like a leader, and then do you want to kind of get out of that fast? So many different paths to exit, or like ways that you can go into business. And I feel like that's something that people don't really think about necessarily very early. And it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and some ideas are just going to be more conducive than others, because it's kind of like an equation. Like businesses where you can put a lot of money in but get a lot of money out, like those are going to be more venture scalable. And businesses where you put a bit of money, you only need a bit of money to get started, but you'll only ever make so much money because your market is only a certain size, or, you know, only a certain segment of people are interested in your product. So I think that's something that we kind of went back and forth for a while, but we've always had this idea of being like a big garment company. When we first started our business, the name we started at Elia & Co., which was just a bra, very early days. Then when we came back to the idea a few years later, then we were looking at more of like workwear basics, and that we were going to call Base. And then we went back to bras, and we did a double skin, but with the idea of then scaling into workwear.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we've always had the idea of being more of a venture scalable business. It is funny though, I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way, because there aren't the same milestones in a job. I almost feel like we're in a bit of like limbo. Like I feel like the time goes by really quickly. Like we will have been working on the idea now for 5 years, which seems like a really long time, but because we weren't really working on it dedicated, and we, you know, it was just kind of like on evenings and weekends, and we didn't call ourselves entrepreneurs even. Like it just feels like, I feel like time has gone really quickly, but also, I don't know, it's just a funny feeling when you don't have like a promotion that you're chasing, right? There's no like milestones. You're just in the business trying to keep it alive, getting more customers, doing the next thing that you have to do to keep going. Yeah.
My favorite thing about it is I feel like when I was in corporate, I got bored really easily, and I therefore like jumped companies quickly, and it also was partially just due to my industry, so it was a really good way to like get seniority and like make more money and work my way up. But like typically around after a year, when I really kind of like knew what I was doing, it would get boring, because it's like your days look the same, and I was even in an industry where like there was a bit of a cycle, so your days didn't necessarily all look the same, but like over the course of the year you go through the same motions. And if there wasn't enough like innovation going on in the company itself, and like enough room for me to take on new tasks quickly, like I'd be like, okay, I'm done. Like I have nothing else to learn, and like I know what to do now, and it's like getting boring, and I was invested. Whereas in entrepreneurship, I've never been bored. It's like you're always learning something. It's like negative bored.
New job every day.
Yeah. So I do appreciate that. I feel like the idea of lifelong learning is so wonderful. And in entrepreneurship, you teach yourself so many things, and you learn from so many people. But yeah, it's interesting, because your goals are a lot more day to day in a sense, and like you can create longer term goals, but we've gone through the motion so many times now where it's like, this is where we're going to be in 3 months, this is where we're going to be in a year, and like we couldn't be more wrong. And then you're like, okay, how long will it actually take us to get to that goal? And I feel like I've gotten to the point where I've now like given up any control or any sort of like, obviously great to still have goals and create those timelines. It's important, but yeah, you have to let go of all of that like idea around security and around versus in corporate, you're like, by this time next year, I'll be promoted to this level. I'll likely be making this amount of, like, it's just so clear. Like 10 years, 20 years is completely laid out for you, which can be nice.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before too, the security I think that you get with a job, you give that up when you start your own business, and you give up kind of having it laid out for you, and you give up the like somebody else defining things for you and giving you security. But then, you know, hopefully there's a lot to gain at the end. And if not, you know, bringing our dream to life, at least we've learned a lot along the way.
Yeah, this past weekend / Monday and Tuesday, my boyfriend and I went to Nakusp. Anyone who is unfamiliar, it's in BC. It's like the Kootenay area, so it's very rural but very beautiful. And so it was just like very peaceful, and we just had this beautiful Airbnb, and we're overlooking the water. And we were talking, we're like, this is sort of like why we're doing all this. Like at the end of the day, it's just about spending more time with each other and spending more time like with yourself and in nature. Even a super like one with nature person, but it is true. It's like that is half the reason people get into entrepreneurship, is to give themselves choice and freedom and their time, and yeah, it was like a nice reminder of that.
Yeah, it was interesting. There's a trend right now on TikTok going around where people post videos, and the text over top is, and I almost forgot that this is the whole point. And it's usually like,
did you tell me that? Because I was like, I feel like that's exactly what I heard, and I can't remember if it was
it's
you or
trending
him
right
now.
now. Maybe I sent you one, but yeah, it's like very much people posting travel videos or in nature, like exploring things, being with friends and family and loved ones. And I think it can be easy to get caught up in like the rat race, whether you're in a corporate job or in like startup land, and chasing like money and power and all. But at the end of the day, this is the only life you have. And a lot of enjoying life, I think, is just finding magic and being in awe and surrounding yourself with love. Yeah, how do you get to that?
Yeah, I love that. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Jay Shetty, and he was saying too that he has some like mentors and friends in his life that are older, and he was like, when you speak to somebody in their 70s, it puts everything into perspective from a time lens, because all of a sudden, you know, that week that you took off for vacation, or that year that you know, like, had a baby, or that whatever time you feel like you're losing or something that you thought like, oh, if I had spent that working, it would get me here. He was like, when you speak to somebody in their 70s, they're like, that's no time at all, like one, like nothing, right? Whereas when you're younger, I feel like every moment feels like you're losing something if you're taking time off.
Like, we probably felt that way even just taking 2 days off, right? Like we haven't, like, I don't remember, you haven't taken much time off at all.
Yeah, I've been trying to be better about, like, if I am taking time off, that I'm, like, taking time off instead of, like, doing half and half. And the nice thing about where we went was, like, there was basically no service. So it was, like, a forced leave as well. So that was nice. Yeah, it is surprisingly difficult to like unplug.
Yeah, and because I think the other thing is that most people, and you and I included for sure, are impact driven. So like, while, you know, the whole point is to enjoy life, part of that enjoyment is getting satisfaction and fulfillment from making an impact. And you know, so to kind of bring it full circle, we really want to empower as many women as possible to have clothing that fits them, that makes them feel good about themselves, and that they can be comfortable in all day, because especially as women, we've spent a lot of our lives not in a place of comfort. And to do that, like, we do have to work really hard, and we do have to scale the business to really big heights to have that kind of sense of impact and fulfillment and satisfaction. And then how do you balance that with the smaller moments of like taking a step back and being like, you know,
Great, that's well said. Yeah, that's really well said. Because I also, like, I think you're the same way, like, love being busy. Like, I love having a full calendar, and, like, I think if I was on vacation for too long, I'd be like, okay, like, I'm a bit bored now. So it is nice to feel like you have a purpose and, like, you're creating value.
Yeah, and I don't think we would feel as motivated and driven if we did have more of a small lifestyle business. Like, I think we both really want to scale a business that touches a lot of people in a big market. And so I think, it's just all about balance and whatever that means to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something fun that I did this weekend was, well, because it's coming up to the end of the month, so I did my budget, and it just reminded me, I think, the importance, so fun, the importance of doing like an audit. And you know, you only know what you can see, and I used to be somebody who didn't budget at all, We talked before on the podcast about having a chaotic, like you can't have chaos in all departments, like you can only have chaos in one department. And so I would say in my previous life, my finances were a bit chaotic. My approach to money was I just pretended I was poor all the time, and then things just sorted itself out. You know, like I just would try not to spend money if I didn't have to, but I didn't know where my money was going or money I had. Like it was very much like a out of sight, out of mind, ignorance is bliss. But I think what I've learned since then, especially now that I like actually need to be frugal, is that knowledge is power. And it's funny, like I was thinking about how expressions always have a counter expression, right? Like absence makes the heart fonder, but there's also like out of sight, out of mind. Like so there's always, so like ignorance is bliss, which is kind of like how I approach my finances, and now I'm approaching them as knowledge is power. So the more I know, like the more power I have. And so instead of just saying like no to all finance opportunities because I'm coming from a place of having no money to spend, if I have, you know, like this much carved out for myself or this much carved out for like date night activities, then I'm better able to like give myself the freedom and space to spend that money.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a good learning for me of knowing where things are going, but part of that also forces you to prioritize, right? So it's like, okay, I see, this isn't me, but this might be my partner is like spending a lot of money at Starbucks on coffees. Like, could you reduce that by, you know, $30 and instead spend that $30 on an activity? And like, maybe not, but at least you see where the trade-offs are. And I think that's a lot with our calendar too. Like we talked about how we now do that, like blocking, like color blocking and like blocking all of our time, because what I find that's done for me is I can see, okay, you know, do I want to spend this hour doing this thing? And I will have to find an hour, which means I have to get rid of something else. And so you just start to do trade-offs, but it's hard to know what the trade-offs look like if you aren't keeping track of things.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that you've touched on in that is like where are your values? Like at the end of the day, you can do that with your calendar, like where are you putting your time, like, and it immediately shows you where your values are, whether or not that's actually aligned with how you want to live or not. But it's like a good snapshot. And if you're seeing like, oh wow, I spend 90% of my time at work and like 10% on like going for dinner or something, and you're like, wow, I spend literally no time with my friends and family, or like I have no time put towards like romantic connections or working out. And it's the same with money. Like, yeah, it's like where are you spending? Like that defines your values. So in the Starbucks example, if like a nice coffee brings you a ton of joy and that's like super worth it for you, then like do it. And then if not really, like if you could make your coffee at home and it would drive the same value, and like you said, that $30 could go towards a date night or an activity, then like you can make those small tweaks and then end up living a much fuller, happier life.
The same thing with energy. So I saw in the Founders Fund newsletter, they had an energy audit that you can do. So thinking back on the past week, think about what drained you the most. So where did you say yes when you wanted to say no? Or like explain yourself where it wasn't necessary, and how could you honor your time better? And then to reflect on that and your boundaries. But I think you could also look at it a bit more holistically of, okay, where did I feel drained? Where did I feel, you know, like my cup was being filled, and is that balanced enough?
Yeah.
Right? And you can almost think of it quantitatively, like I need 5 hours of cup filling to then have 5 hours of cup draining, and how am I balancing the calendar? But then I also think there's some interesting pieces around how your energy ebbs and flows, and I think we've talked about this too, like especially as entrepreneurs, being flexible and knowing, okay, where do I have the most focus? Like I find for me, I mean, for most people, your focus and willpower is a, you know, finite resource. So throughout the day, you lose it. So like I have a really hard time doing dishes in the evening after dinner because I just don't have the energy. But in the morning I do. Yeah. So like I'll do the dishes more in the morning. And same with I have that work block early in the morning to do the hardest things. It's when I have the most energy and focus.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. I was going to say, I feel like the energy audit is also helpful in the sense of like, I feel like I can be like a yes person. Like I don't like saying no. And sometimes I overbook myself for that reason because I don't want to say no to my friends, and I don't want to say no to anything around the business, and I don't want to say no to like my personal time. And then you just end up overloaded. And then despite the activities maybe being even like cup filling activities, just due to the sheer volume of them, like it's not any longer. Like it's like if you have a really social weekend, you could have had like so much fun with all your friends, but then if you don't have like an evening to decompress by yourself, like it's like you didn't ever have that time to recharge.
I was just gonna say it's the hidden costs, right, that I feel like not everybody sees. And I feel like a good example of that too is open bars. Like you're like, oh, this drink is free, but you know, the drink also
is it worth the cost?
Yeah. Like it's, if you're watching your like calories, those are not free calories, and you know, if it makes you feel groggy the next day, then that's going to be a loss of productivity. Like what's the true cost behind what, you know, if you say yes to something, it means you're saying no to something else, and I think that's always a really important thing to remember.
Yeah, I think you said it best with like knowledge is power at the end of the day, because you can, like, you know, life's gonna life, and you can only have so much control at the end of the day. So if you can understand where your values are, where you're spending your money, where you're spending your time, like those are things that you can theoretically control to an extent forever. So it does give you like a lot of peace of mind, I think.
Yeah, data-driven decisions. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. I feel like in the past for me, like travel and vacation, like I really wanted to go somewhere, like get on a plane and you know, versus like I wouldn't even want to consider something local, I don't think. And then now, since we travel so much for the business, I'm like I don't want to like commute for very long, and I don't want to like, you know, like obviously if it was a long trip, 100%, but it is nice when it's just like almost like a staycation or something close by. Like I have a lot more gratitude, I think, for those types of trips now than I used to.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the energy audit too, right? Like if the travel component is going to burn you out, then you might as well cut that. And
yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to be on a plane anymore. I'm over it. Ever again. And even early on in the business, I was like, I loved like even all my corporate jobs. I was like, I want to travel as much as I can. Like get me on that plane. Totally. And I'm like, I want to be home. I want to be my routine.
Yeah, it wears off quickly.
Yeah, it really does.
But speaking of which, I'm excited to see you in Vancouver next week.
Speaking of which, we're traveling on Monday.
Yeah.
Much longer trip for you than for me.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to Vancouver for the BC Business 30 Under 30 dinner, so we're very excited. And Bryn and I get to see each other. I feel like we see each other probably like almost every month. But we are trying to reduce. Yeah, we are trying to reduce travel if we don't have to, since it is tiring. Yeah. So it'll be a nice little jaunt in person, and hopefully the weather is nice and sunny in Vancouver.
Yeah, and we have some strategic pieces that we've saved for being in person, because it's just better.
So much easier.
Yeah,
100%.
Okay, well, have a great week.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Bye. Building something new, whether it's a business brand or a personal brand, is always a journey.
We appreciate you tuning in to the Double Digest. If this episode resonated with you, let us know with a review, share with a friend, and subscribe to keep up with more behind the scenes and real talk.
See you next Monday.